Ben Williams, hello. Thank you very much for being here.
Sandy, how are you?
I'm very good, mate. I'm very good. Just before we hit record there, we were talking about phone games and how halfway through the podcast you're going to rush off to the toilet and sit and play Candy Crush. But as I said, I couldn't pick out I couldn't pick out Candy Crush if I tried from a line of games.
I
Yeah.
can't believe that. I'm shocked by that. Also, I have a secret I have a secret game which is extremely nerdy where I went to a kid's birthday party the other week with obviously my children. I just didn't turn up to a random one unannounced. And one of the dads of the mums was there who we know quite well. So quite an older bloke, science teacher. And he's like, "Oh, we're chatting." And he's like, "Oh, Ben, you should look at this game. It's really good." And he showed me it. And I was like, "That looks literally like the most boring thing I've ever seen." And it's 2D. It's not even 3D on your phone. It's 2D of getting a rocket from Earth to the moon, and you have to apply like the mathematic principles and all that stuff. I was
Oh
like,
my
that's not
god.
my type of game. It's too heavy. And then I downloaded it, and I've been stuck on it ever since, just
Oh
fixated
god.
and like nerding out, getting from Earth to the moon. I've got to the moon, and now I'm planning my trip to Mars. But yeah, that's what keeps me busy.
Oh, nice. Well, best of luck with your trip to Mars. That game sounds like a nightmare. I'm not a maths person at all.
Yeah,
Do you
we just lost hundreds of listeners within that first 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone's gone. Bye,
So
everyone. Yeah, yeah. Well, if you're still here, thank you. Do you find? I mean, interesting tangent, but one I suppose I'm quite interested to go down because I said the whole theme of this conversation is going to be about kind of work and stress and things like that.
mm,
Do you find yourself are you a bit of a procrastinator? If you're sat trying to work, do you find yourself getting drawn to your phone and sitting on whether it's a game or kind of doom scrolling social media, or
oh yeah,
have you got things in place to stop yourself doing that?
yeah. So I yeah, definitely do. Do you know what? I heard someone talking about this the other day, and it was a founder on a podcast, and he was talking about his ADHD and how ADHD is so much more common in all of us. And he was talking about all these symptoms around you could be working and all of a sudden you'd flick the screen and look at something, or you just jump on your phone quickly and then you come back to your work. And I was like, oh shit, I do that a lot.
Yeah.
And I noticed it quite a lot last year. And so I deleted a few apps. I came off one or two socials. I kept LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn's the only one on my phone. But
Wow.
I'm more of a screen slider. So my phone's less of a distraction, but I find it quite easy to just slide across on my Mac, be on something and then slide back to something else. So I actually find the worst bit is moving from piece of work to piece of work. So as much as I'm in the tech industry and then all this tech available, I still stick to post-it notes and I
Nice.
still try and do the hardest one on the post-it note first and then work down the list. So yes and no, I suppose, but I'm definitely aware of how much more my attention span is just dwindling when I'm focusing on stuff.
Do you think you taking a bit more of a sort of analog approach, writing the post-its and working your way down? Do you attribute kind of doing that to your sort of time in the military and being a bit more sort of perhaps I don't know, garnering a bit more of a pragmatic approach to things. I mean, I'm speaking of someone who's never been in the military, but I've had a couple of kind of mates I know that were in the Marines and stuff. They've been on the podcast and having chatted to them,
Mm.
and even just in pop culture, you see that they're always kind of come at it from a very pragmatic sensibility. Do you think
Yeah,
has that definitely carried over into your kind of the way you operate?
yeah, definitely. Like you'd never go anywhere in the Marines without a notepad and pen, and you'd always have a spare pen with you as well. And that's always stuck with me. I know lots of people would write notes down on their phone or on their laptop or in, you know, quite funky electrical pads. My business partner's got this writing pad that's digital, and I'm still there. I'm like notepad. In fact, a Royal Marines notepad of all notepads, and
Nice.
quite happy just jotting down my thoughts, and it's thoughts or it's to-do lists or tasks. And I love that whole feeling of, I'd put two lines through one of my post-it notes now as we're coming on, and it's just you get that tiny little hit of dopamine to be like, yeah, I've actually achieved something, and you can actually see it there on my desk. They're everywhere, which is quite untidy for a military guy. But it's also like pragmatic sense of in the military, you're taught to go on patrols by checkpoint, and you go through processes of doing things, and I think that stuck with me of how I sort of operate and try to go from checkpoint to checkpoint as opposed to just from the start to the end destination as quick as I can. And I think that can be found throughout quite a lot of my work.
Yeah, that. It's really interesting. I started. I mean, I'm very guilty. I use the Notes app for everything. I've got it open on the side of my
Mm,
screen right now with all the notes for this podcast. I use it on my phone all the time. But it was only kind of 6 months ago I started. I used to have a weekly checklist, and then I went,
mm,
I'm going to have a daily checklist now, and I wrote kind of everything I'm going to do, even little things like I in the last year I started training a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I write down go to jiu-jitsu on it because whilst it's something
yeah,
I enjoy, it's still cool when I get home and I'm knackered and sweaty. I go, oh, cool, tick. And like you said, you get that little
yeah,
hit of dopamine, and it's a really nice thing to kind of to have in your day. And yeah, it was. I think
yeah,
Matthew McConaughey said in his book Green Lights, he's talking about journaling, and he was like, write down the good stuff as well. It's very easy to look back. Oh, what shit time I was having, what shit time, but actually look back. And I kind of taken that attitude with my sort of daily notes. But I must admit, there is something satisfying about pen to paper, even though my handwriting's awful. But yeah,
yeah.
maybe I
I
should.
I got I got a very fortunate. I know we spoke about it offline, but when I met Stephen Bartlett on his podcast, he sent me a book afterwards. I'm looking for it now, which is ridiculous because I should know where it is. Oh, there it is. Um, the Diary of a CEO blank book.
Yeah,
Beautiful sort of gold leaf pages and just a really nice book. And it was blank for ages because I was always a bit like, oh, what do I even write in there? And I just started actually writing down nice things people say to me
oh, that's
because it's
cool.
very easy to listen to the shit people talk about. You could listen to all the criticism about the product we're building, objections, the difficulty in building a business, things people would say to you, all these different things. And I just took to almost having my own book of ego where I could go back and reflect on, the nice things people have said about me, and I've recorded it. And I've started to talk a lot of what we do. We offer services as well, so we speak to businesses. We offer mentoring alongside the product that we're building at Loopin, and little things like that, getting people to just in their working day write down nice things people have said because it's so easy to be. My manager's an arsehole, and I don't get on with the team I work with, but we miss actually probably quite a lot of the nice stuff that's said between us. And from family to friends to professional people that we work with, just jotting that down is really good for our mental health. It's good to remind ourselves of how awesome we all are. And I think that's one of the biggest things I try to write down quite a lot. There's not much in there,
That's all right. No,
but
no,
there's one or two.
that's that's a really cool thing to do because there is, it's called negativity confirmation bias, isn't it? So
Yeah.
say you scroll through the comment section, and there's hundreds and hundreds of nice ones talking about how great you are, and then there's one person that's like, well, I thought it was shit, and you
Yeah.
you just zone in on that one and you forget about everything else, and you just take this one person who's probably a complete hater. And what does David Goggins say? No one above you ever a hater, or something like that. you know
Mm.
so yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that's a that's a brilliant kind of practice to start. Maybe I'll start trying to do that. Yeah, because it
It's
does.
very easy, isn't it?
Yeah, and it does give you that the warm and fuzzy, especially if we're on the topic of mental health. It does sort of start bringing topping your levels back up a little bit. Um, yeah,
And no one sees it either. That's why I call it my book of ego because no one sees it. I don't go around showing it off. And look
yeah,
what this
yeah,
person said. It's not on social. It's not a comment. There's lots of practices where you can look in the mirror and practice, self appreciation and stuff. And actually having a few pages where you can go back through and look at the nice things people have said about you with just you is just an awesome thing to do. And yeah, when you hit low times or not feeling great, what a great reminder to remind yourself how good you are by what others have said.
yeah. Absolutely. Clip that. There it is. There's my Instagram clip. Thank you very much. Um, so Ben, you mentioned there, and one of the big reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast, fellow podcast alumni Dan Aldis, who's been on the podcast before, told me to chat to you about all the work you're doing with you said you work in tech now, this company Loopin, all about kind of work burnout and things like that. To put it into
Mm,
perspective, a lot of my regular listeners will know, but obviously this is the first time we've met. I quit my job end of 2019. It was actually, I was still working in the water sports industry, which is what I did for 10 years basically. But
Yeah.
despite it sounding like a lovely industry, I got to the point where essentially I had like a mental breakdown. And I
Mm.
attribute some of that to just being burnt out and things. So this is quite a personal topic for me. But can you kind of go into a little bit about what it is you're doing and what it is you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, sure. When I left the military, I actually wrote a post about this the other day where I think Dan, who you're talking about, spotted me about never suffering burnout in the military. And then when I left the military, suffering from it several times, two of which ended up in hospital.
Wow.
Um, and being a trying to put my finger on it and understand, hang on, spent 10 years working in some of the most hostile environments in the world, been physically exhausted beyond belief, hungry, driven to sort of desperation and survival many a times, and then never burn out. There's obviously mental health things that happen in the military, and those can't be hidden from. But the idea of burnout, where you are just so fatigued you can't carry on, and not to the point of physical exhaustion, but days, weeks, months on end, where you are just not who you were, just never existed. I never saw it. Never saw it with my colleagues. And it's easy when you're in the green suit to be saying, well, we're machines. We're trained to be like this. This is our mindset, both mentally and physically. And you have that machine like attitude. And then when you come out and you begin to feel it very differently and suffer, and so you're sort of plugged into an ESG at a hospital and blood tests with heart palpitations, your blood pressure's through the roof. You're sat there going, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Um, how's this happening? And
Yeah.
I remember sitting there thinking, I thought I was like a machine, like almost feeling like a broken boy all of a sudden. Like I
Mm.
was a machine. I thought I'm not, I was trained to be different.
Yeah.
And it takes years to get through that. That's years ago. And that became the kind of genesis for what is Loopin now, where how do you better connect people in the workplace so you understand how one another are feeling on almost on an emotional level, so that you can support one another and you can praise one another at the right times. You understand where people are going through stressful periods and they're going through great periods, they're motivated, they're focused, and helping managers understand that as well. So ultimately what we went out to create was an AI tool that we use service holistic services as well, our own mentoring, to really help companies understand themselves better and connect and begin to spot risks in burnout, engagement, performance, and retention. And if
Mm.
we can better help companies foresight this within teams, you can have an impact immediately. And people like you won't hit the wall and quit, or less people like you will hit the wall and quit. And you know, for a business, that's ROI, that's headcount, that's revenue, it's profit, and then for the employee, it's that's their livelihood, it's them as a person, it's their sanity and everything that comes with it. And we're really trying to make a mark on that with what we're building within our technology and our offering, that fostering that connection that like we had in the Marines. Is the
Mm.
thing I miss most. And I know when I left, that was the one big thing. I was like, shit, I haven't got people to turn to now to moan or cry or fall out with or laugh with. I've got far less, and unfortunately, that's quite common in the
Mm.
civilian world. So, yeah, our ambition is to change that and fix that, connect people better, and then also help arm the company with the knowledge that it needs to support its people better.
Yeah, I think I might have read one of the posts you referred to, and one of the big things that really I took away from it was when you were talking about your time in the military versus civilian life, and why perhaps there was more burnout and mental stress and fatigue. And I really like what you said about stress and how you have kind of prolonged and acute stress. So
Mm,
perhaps when you're in the military, and again please speak to this if I'm butchering it, but you're in the military and you're out on operation for X amount of time, and for that time also I think there's a level of expectation in stress as well, of like realistically you're going into the suck for a few days or a week or so,
mm,
whatever, you kind of know, so you can sort of mentally prepare yourself for it. But then flip side of that, you're in civilian life and you're doing what's meant, you're just essentially living your life. You're
mm,
going to work and then you're spending your weekends with your friends or your family, and then you're going back to work for the week, and you're just living as a lot of us do. And but you're like, why am I just this little, perhaps it's slightly less stress, but just for a way longer time, and it just slowly kind of wears you down essentially.
Yeah.
Would you attribute that to being the reason for a lot of these things as well? Or can you go into that a little bit
Well,
more?
yeah, I had last summer when we were doing an investment raise, which was if anyone wants to know what stress is like, try and go and raise investment for a company that doesn't have any revenue at that time and is in the market starting to tumble. And I sat with quite a well-known VC in London, and we were talking about founder and CEO mental health and what it looks like. And he said, "Oh, you must be breezing through this journey with the experiences you have." And I challenged it and said, "No, that's but far from. This is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life." And he
Wow.
tried to call bullshit on me. He was like, "Nah, bullshit. Commando training, Afghanistan." Like, yeah, but you think about it, dress it back. The what you do in the military is exactly what you described there. It's acute. You know, the acute stress is it can be ferocious combat, but it's going to end. It ends two ways. It ends and you're not here anymore, or it ends and you're back at the base. It's just that simple. Um, but it will end. And also within that, it's something I talked about in that post is the operational cycle. You're going away for 6 to 7, maybe 8 months. You know you're going to get 2 weeks break during that period for R&R. You know you'll get a visit, somewhere like Camp Bastion. You'll come back from the front line for a couple of days, and you know the ops are going to end. You don't get that in the civilian world. You get quarter to quarter, bill to bill, and the stress is so much more prolonged and in your face all the time. And then when you put into what's happening in the state of the world now,
Mm.
people aren't going. Well, lots of people go to the office, but more people aren't going to the office. So they're sat at home. They start their day, they finish their day. They're still in the same environment, and then they're still surrounded by the same news of the cost of living and everything else that's happening in the world that's challenging for us right now. And there's no escapism. The stress is continuous. We go month to month, is this the last paycheck I'm going to get before I get laid off? And all these other things with what's happening. And there's no escape. And what you said there is really something that's kind of just dawned on me that I haven't really given much thought to is this acceptance piece. That in the military, again, you accept you're going to go on 32 weeks Royal Marines
Mm.
training. You accept you're going to deploy to Afghanistan. I remember my troop sergeant, I think he must have coined it from Band of Brothers because I've heard it since. But it was the first time I heard it when he said it. He said, the moment you accept you're dead, the job gets easier. And it's a very morbid, callous way of looking at it. But actually, what it does is enables you to accept what is the worst thing that could happen here. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the worst thing. All right, now I can think with a bit more clarity, and I also know when it's all going to end. And you just don't get that in the civilian world. And
No.
what we're seeing at the moment, the state of the economy and way businesses are, and lots of layoffs, is people cannot see the wood through the trees, and so the stress is just surrounding us. We're kind of caught in it at the moment, and no wonder why so many people are burning out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it to me, as you know, it very much feels like out of the frying pan and into the fire. We've just finished COVID, and that stressed so many people for different ways. That was a lot
Yeah.
more. That was a lot more sort of still that sort of stress and anxiety about the state of the world, but a lot more perhaps isolation, which I guess you said it is carrying on, given that people are staying at home, but they've got a bit more of an option now. But something I was really thinking about is at least in COVID, and you were worried about isolation. Perhaps you're getting a bit lonely and things, but at least you knew you weren't missing out because nobody else was doing anything. Whereas
Yeah.
now with this cost of living and things, there's a bit more of a divide of some people, and even within people's friendship groups, some people are still going to be, oh yeah, well, we're still going away this summer. We're still going to Ibiza in the spring. We're still going to do this.
Mm,
And there will be certain people that go, I can't, so
mm,
I guess that will also be added on to this. They already feel like they're working their asses off, and then they're not able to go and actually enjoy themselves because of
yeah.
because of what's happening. It was something that just came to me the other day.
Well, for a lot of people, they feel like they're not being able to take a breath. I went to an event a few weeks ago, and someone was saying around um, black swan events. Every 5 years, we hit a black swan event, being an anomaly in like the economy or a
Right.
war or a crisis. And on paper, we've hit 7 or 8 in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That's quite a ridiculous number for us all to experience. And again, it's something I talk a lot about quite passionately, like looking at the military, um, and those listening, I try not to drench too much in the military, but there's great learnings we can take from it. Is when trauma's experienced, and again, that's like war. When you go through trauma, you don't really feel the effects of it till a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And if there's good support systems in place, that it's easier to deal with. And if you look at history, World War Two, yeah, it's a write-off, but you look more towards the Falklands, those mental health problems didn't start coming out for about 30 years. There was nothing in place to support those people,
Mm.
and those veterans. And the Gulf War was the same. And then as Iraq and Afghanistan started kicking off, as we went through the cycles of the war, there was more to learn and there was more support available. And although we had the suicides and the mental health issues, and the hidden injuries, we were still able to take more care of our troops. And so the reason I say that is with trauma is like this bow wave. You do this huge event, it's life changing, but you don't realize how much it's changed your life until a year or two afterwards, which
Mm.
I personally couldn't account for that. And it's the same with Loopin. Wrong plug. It's the same with COVID. We've all gone through quite a really challenging period of time in our lives, and some people are shrugging it off. That's what happens in adversity. People are like, this is nothing, and other people are suffering like they've never suffered in their lives. And then it's shaken the economy, and we've not been able to gain our breath from coming out of the pandemic before we've gone into the Ukrainian crisis, the fuel crisis, and everything that's linked to that, and then financial problems. And everyone's just like, wow, what the fuck? I can't actually believe that we're going into something else that is equally as difficult to deal with as what COVID was. And because of that, you're going to get this massive tidal wave of people dealing with the trauma that they've been through and now what they're going through now. And with that's going to come a lot of people which are going to need to take a knee and take a breath. And it's going to impact families, it's going to impact friendships, businesses, and everything. It's not to sound doom and gloom whatsoever. We can do a lot to be aware of this
Yeah.
and realize that COVID, for us, the impact of COVID is only just beginning and how it will affect us mentally.
Yeah.
And that's a bit we've got to be prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. I yeah, said it to death on previous episodes, but from personal experience as well, for me, like awareness has been key. And awareness is also a journey, and people need to realize that. Um, I think one of the big things why I was struggling so much is because I went so long struggling. It sounds really odd to say struggling without being aware that I was necessarily struggling. I just
Yeah.
became a bit of a drifter essentially. I was just sort of floating through the halls like a ghost, like a shadow,
Yeah.
complete shadow of my former self. And it wasn't until it got so bad to the point where I'm like, I don't think I want to be here anymore, kind of thing. And then suddenly
Mm,
something in my head went, oh, something's very wrong here, and
mm,
then I managed to kind of seek help, and proud to say I'm doing much better now. But and now, because of that awareness, I've been able to kind of put steps in and manage my life in a certain way where, I say all the time, what was once a bad week became a bad day, and now is a bad morning or a bad afternoon. You know,
yeah.
because I put steps in, I've got this awareness. The minute I wake up and I sit up and I'm like, well, something up here is not right today. Sandy doesn't feel good today. So I'm like, cool. What steps can I take? And that goes to what you said, at the start with you're making a list on your notes is breaking it down just to those little things. And that's what I try and do. I say one game at a time. So it's essentially the same thing as what you say, but I say it differently. So yeah, one game at a time, right? Let's get through the next hour. Let's, and try and do something good, and then kind of building from there. But
Mm,
like you said, this tidal wave, I worry that the amount of people that won't become aware until they're at breaking point,
yeah.
rather than being aware as things slowly start to go. And then while they can still go, right, okay, something I need to do. We
Yeah.
don't need however many thousands of people getting to the point where they're essentially suicidal before they start going, right, something's wrong, you know?
Yeah. Someone wrote on my LinkedIn about that the other day. It's amazing. We only make changes when you hit rock bottom. Um, and I think a lot of that is due, or my own opinion on that is due to acceptance.
Yeah.
Awareness is one part, but then you've got to have acceptance behind it as well to go, nothing's wrong. That's the other thing that happens. People go, "There's something wrong," or "I need help." It's not that at all. It's something feels unusual for you. You feel different to how you feel normally, and you're not as positive as you might be before. And that might be one day, it could be 2 years, but nothing's wrong with you. We're human beings. We scar ourselves as mentally as we do physically, and I think there's such a thing around people accepting that they they have to make something new happen within their lives to make them feel a bit better about how they feel about themselves, which is the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not, oh, I need to make the world feel better around me. It's like, I feel shit today. How can I make myself feel good? Mine's just going for a run on the trails. Just
Mm.
I'll just plod along like a fat ex-marine now, but I don't care. It's just the air in my lungs, and just be like, oh, fuck all the problems today. I'll deal
Yeah.
with it later or tomorrow. I'll do some exercise and think on it clear ahead. And it's just accepting, accept something's up, and accept you need to do something about
Yeah.
it, and then it becomes more manageable.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I actually put something up on Instagram yesterday. Yesterday I woke up, or as people listening to this, it won't be yesterday, but as I'm recording it is, I woke up and just something was off straight away, and I sort of sat down to start work, and I was like, can't be arsed with this, can't be arsed with anything, all this, and I was like, right, cool, I'll send one email, and then I'll like, I don't know, go and sit and watch a movie or something. But I sent one
Mm.
email and then I was like, oh, I'll just send another one. And I did that, and then I work in marketing, so then I was like, oh, cool, I'll just go do a bit of writing. So I went and did that, and then I was like, oh, I'll do this. And before I knew it, I've been sat there for 3 or 4 hours and I'd done a load of work. And then I couldn't be bothered to go to jiu-jitsu class, which is like a 15-minute walk from the house. And I went, it was a sunny day, so I'm like, right, I'll just put my stuff in and I'll walk. It's a walk along the seafront as well, so it's nice. So I'll walk, I'll listen to my book, and if I don't go to jiu-jitsu, I've been for a little walk and I'll walk home. I'll go to shop and I'll walk home. And then I
Mm-hmm.
walked, and then I got there and was like, "Well, I'm here now. I'm at the door." So I went in, and then I just went through my day yesterday like that, and I got to the end of the day, and I was like, "Shit, good day." You know,
Yeah.
it was it's a funny, like, it was like a middle ground between sort of autopilot and me just being like, just one more thing, one more thing, one more thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a guest on. I spent a lot of time in the world of windsurfing, and I had a pro windsurfer called Timo Mullen on, who's also a very successful businessman, and he said something really wise to me. Um, and one way that he stops himself getting burnt out or stressed or feeling like he's missing out is he just tries to just go all in on whatever he's doing at that moment. He's like, if I'm going windsurfing for the day, my phone's off. That's what I'm doing. If I'm
Mm.
working, my phone is right there, but I'm not looking at forecasts or, I wish I was out with my mates or anything. He's like, I'm working. And it's not I don't think it was he just wants to get it over and done with so that he can go. I think it was just like, he has this mindset of like, I'll just go, all in. I wonder if you have something similar from the military. It seems like something that they may kind of get you to do. I don't know. Well, maybe you can speak.
Yeah. It's the classic one foot in front of the other. You know, um, there's many physical tests that you do in the military where that is actually an actual thing where you just need to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And they become quite the testing points. I think, it's easy to do the sort of short burst stuff on the endurance courses and uh, the other tests that we do. But when it comes to like the 30 miler, which is the final Royal Marines test across Dartmoor, that's a long old way in 8 hours, and it's a long day. And the moment you step off, it's literally like, ah, right, okay. And everyone hits their wall. At some point, you hit your wall, whether that's mile one, you go, oh my God, I've got 29 miles left. Or you hit mile 24, I think I hit 25, and I was like, fucking hell, there's still 5 miles left. And you just find a way to just kind of put one foot in front of the other. Where I learned that the real hard way, though, and began to practice it was on as a recruit, you do one of your sort of like more senior exercises towards the end of training is uh, 8 days on Brecon Beacons, just
Mm.
on an exercise called violent entry, and it's a fatiguing exercise. Throughout the Marines, it's like as a recruit, it's the one which carries the most sort of like, oh my God, I've got violent entry next. And you do what's the name of the yomp? You march in, but you don't know the destination,
All
and you
right.
do it at night. So they set you off. God, we set off way early in the morning, so the light was just coming up, and we were still going, well, into sort of past midnight. Um, no, we started later, and that was it. We started just after lunch, and then we were still going at midnight, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And they don't tell you where you're going. You're carrying all your kit, Bergen, that's easily 80, 90 pounds, if not more. You got your ammo, you got your webbing. You're just a heavy, slow tractor, and you can't see anything. And I remember all you could just see on the horizons is just like this darker spot, which would be the wood that you might be heading towards. And there's like
Mm.
wood block after wood block. I remember I was near the front just because that was the order of the march, and the corporal was like, "Yeah, that's the one, lads. That's where we're going." And then you'd arrive at it, you kind of walking by it, and then he's like, "All right, off we go to the next one." And it was just relentless like that. I was like, and I got to like the third wood block, which he was like, "That's the one." Did it for every single one. It's been a bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest. And then when I got to the third one, I was just like, well, I might as well stop counting the wood blocks and stop listening to him and just concentrate on where I'm putting my feet. And that
Mm.
was it. It just turned into a plod. And we did two more wood blocks, but they just kind of floated by that point. And got to the end of the evening, and yeah, you collapse in a pile in the harbour area and try and get some sleep, and then you're out patrolling. And it was only afterwards where you reflect on that resilience to just accept that the pain's not going to end for some time,
Yeah.
and that you just make do with each foot in front of the other. And I find that's quite a good thing to apply to what we do as a business. It's very easy to be like, oh, the money's running out, or oh, where's the revenue? And oh, we could sell one day and be millionaires, and everything else that comes with starting a business. And actually just enjoy the journey, to be honest. It's hard, it's relentless, but my God, does it bring purpose? And I think
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people miss is like your walk yesterday. The purpose isn't to get to jiu-jitsu. The purpose you found was just hands in pockets, enjoying the fresh air, carrying your bag, and you might end up at
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, and you did, and then it became a new purpose, and then you walked home, and all of a sudden the reflection is, oh, it's quite nice actually. The purpose is what you're doing in that moment, and feeling satisfied and fulfilled by it. And don't get me wrong, I was not satisfied and fulfilled by walking across the Brecon Beacons, but it helped me apply that one foot in front of the other and just be in the present. It's like very mindfulness, isn't it? And I think that's something that people can do more of and do it better. Very fixated on where's the end? Where's the end? How do I get to the end? Usually, when you climb a mountain, you end up reflecting on the journey to the top and not the summit. And
Yeah.
that's something that's easily applicable to our days.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, it's they talk a lot about sorry, I'm obsessed with jiu-jitsu at the moment, so I'm gonna say that I'm gonna use that as a
Once it gets you, doesn't it?
dude, I'm so into it. So a lot of the time they say, all these guys, it's for anyone listening, it's an average of 10 years to achieve your black belt. Most people it's
Yeah.
about 10 years. So and every time, these guys get their black belt, they're like, I was waiting for the fanfare and all this. And then every single person that I've seen, talk about getting a black belt, they're like, now the work starts. They get their black belt,
Mm.
now it starts. And I'm sat here as a 4-stripe white belt, and I'm sat there and I'm like, why do I give a shit then? If they've got to the point where they're a black belt and they're like, and now it begins, I'm like, why am I stressed about, oh, when am I going to get my blue belt? Because it doesn't matter.
Mm.
As long as I go into class every day and leave feeling like I'm kind of happy with my own progress, and more importantly, did I enjoy it? Do I leave like with a bit of satisfaction and I'm like, yeah, I had fun. But if I feel like I'm getting better on my own little journey, then why does it matter? It's kind of stuck with me. I sometimes I worry it's making me lazy with my training, but I don't think it is. I think it's just
No, I
a bit
think
more mindful with it.
it's yeah. Also, that really resonates because it's taken me back. I remember when I passed out of training, and you finally get your green beret, and you've gone through all that hard work to get
Yeah.
it. It's a heavy investment to get that green beret, and stand there and be like, "Whoa, I'm a Royal Marines Commando." I remember texting my mum just saying, "I'm a Royal Marines Commando."
Awesome.
It's quite an empowering thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the officer took us through. Was like, guys, now the real work begins. And
Mm.
what he didn't, and he explained it. He was like, what I what he didn't mean was you're off to war and you're going to do all these things and it's going to get harder. He was speaking about how you have to now uphold the values of the core and the ethos and what you stand for. By having earned the green beret, you now need to retain the green beret, and
Mm,
that's harder than earning it. And that always stuck with me. It's very much what you said about jiu-jitsu. The reason you then achieve the black belt isn't to I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. It's now you need to epitomize what that black belt represents,
means,
and that's
yeah,
harder than anything. And that's, I know that from the BJJ community, of how much that is ingrained in the culture
yeah.
of, if you're a higher belt, you respect the lower belts, but the lower belts respect you back, and it's how you build that. And I do believe that's, I've never ever seen a sport personally like BJJ where it's got that culture embedded within the community. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I love that idea of once you get to the top, then you start earning
Mm.
and upholding. It resonates deeply, but I think that's part of high performance, isn't it? That's what I met in the Marines. Is you're a high performer, so once you start climbing the ranks of high performance, more is expected of you.
Yeah, exactly. The your own metric of success suddenly has to increase, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
which can be difficult and can lead to kind of more stress, but equally a bit more pride. Um,
yeah.
and I wonder if, while we're on there, have you found any of the stuff we've just been saying there? Have you found that sort of crossing over into what you're trying to do with Loopin? And you said you were chatting to kind of about mental health with CEOs and things like that. I know obviously there's a huge culture in the military about leadership and things like that. Do you find yourself talking to sort of CEOs and things like that, talking to them about how to as well as talking to like employees about how to better manage themselves? How
Yeah,
do you approach talking to like the leaders and about it all?
yeah. So I'm really fortunate. Some people say it's down to hard work, and I sometimes believe it's luck. I've had an amazing amount of experiences where, I can say I'm a Royal Marines Commando. I've written for Penguin Business. I've worked with Simon Sinek on his platform. I've been interviewed by Stephen Bartlett. I run my own business. I've worked with England football, and I don't say that to say, oh, I've done all these things. It's what it's enabled me to do is build up a huge repository of high performance. And what does it look like here? What does it look like there? I'm not industry specific. I've worked with England football, and then I've worked with the bank, and then I've been in the
Mm,
military, and then I've written a book myself. That's high performance on its own. You've got to be disciplined to
yeah.
write it. And there's such a huge thing that I think the pendulum could shift in the wrong direction at the moment, where well-being and mental health almost becomes the scapegoat for performance in a business. And I'm a big believer in that. I've had PTSD. I've been diagnosed with it. I've had my traumatic experiences, and it wasn't nice. It was a very dark time to live through.
Mm,
But I sure as hell won't let it affect my fucking performance. And I won't ever use it as an excuse. I will use it as a blocker and understand I can't perform at my highest today because something's lodged, but I would make amends with that and try and work a way through. And I think one thing that I've noticed business owners and leaders be quite skeptical of, which I want to stop and help change this way of thinking, is, oh, but what does mental health really do for our business? Because ultimately, what all they care about, which is right, because I run a business, is what's our head count, what's our profit and loss, what's the revenue at the moment, and
mm,
how we're performing as a business. And that is absolutely right that a business leader thinks like that. But we have to get people to think in different ways to understand that well-being and mental health is looked at too holistically and too nicely as a nice to have. I spoke to a company the other week that I was trying to, pitch Loopin to, and they said, "Oh, we've completely got rid of our entire well-being budget. We're just using free apps." And I was like, "Well, that's let me challenge you. That's not the right thing to do, because it sends an appalling message to your people that when it gets tough, you're willing to draw the line through it. But it also shows the stigma it still carries. So our ambition at Lupin is, how do you create an environment through our product and our services that enables leaders of organizations to understand the risks at the moment? This team here is clearly not psychologically safe, or you're going to have retention and performance issues there. You have a very open team here, and you can see how they are. This one's really disengaged. These are indicators to your business to show what might go wrong and what might go right. Don't run away from that.
Mm.
Don't run away from that problem. Run towards it and go, okay, this manager here needs support. They need training and building psychological safety in their teams, because if you can have more emotionally connected people within your teams, you can have high performers. Okay, this team over here is doing this and X, Y, Z, and so on. And just helping companies spend their money better, be more aware of where they're heading, but at the same time, the employee and the managers are far more connected than they've ever been. And that again goes back to my experiences in sport, in high performing teams, in the military. Is the thing that got a lot of people, the team itself, not an individual sport, but high performance in a team that gets people to these levels, is the commitment to one another. And when you've got that, burnout doesn't not exist, but it's easier to deal with, and you can actually openly talk about it. Performance is higher, leadership's higher quality, all these things, which is what businesses are looking for in their people.
Yeah, it's the camaraderie aspect, isn't it? It's the
Exactly.
we're all in this together kind of thing, rather than
Yeah.
I'm just a mindless drone and so's everybody else here, and none of us are interested in each other, which I imagine is
But
probably how people feel. Sorry, you go.
no. But no, sorry to interrupt. But on that point, the toughest thing though to get through to people, and this is correct because the skeptic lot will be listening now, going, "Yeah, but I go to work for me," and that's true. When we go to work in the military, we go to war, and there's that specific mission and objective that we're going to fight to get over and make sure that we don't get our friends killed.
Mm.
When we play for England, we're trying to win the World Cup, so we need to all pull together in that direction and win the World Cup together. In business, it's very difficult because people join and their mission isn't necessarily to stay at Pixar or continue working at Apple.
Mm.
It might be the pinnacle in a particular role, and then one day they want to go to another business, or they want to go to another team or another role somewhere else. And that's the bit we've got to get used to. But that doesn't mean the camaraderie shouldn't be there. And how it can be there is, okay, so what inspires you? Oh, I'm really into marketing and I want to achieve all these things in my career, and I'm looking forward to doing it. Knowing that about someone doesn't necessarily mean that I should be worried that they might leave the organization in 3 or 4 years. I want to empower them to get the best from the skills that I can bring them. I want to leave a legacy. I want them to make their mark on this company. And yeah, sure, go and do the next thing. And the more we know about one another in that sense of what's your goldfish called, or what goals are you working towards at the moment, what truly drives you, where do you really want your career to go, and know this information about one another, we will dig in a bit deeper for each other and we will fight harder for the cause.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to one thing you said at the start of that was you were talking about, and this is something that interests me, and I find it's a bit of a juxtaposition within myself of a lot of the content I put out and the talking and stuff on the podcast. I'm very big on kind of work life balance. It's one of the reasons I quit my job. I was like, I want to, I don't want someone telling me how many days of holiday I can have and where I have to be and all that stuff. I was like, no, fuck that, you know. And often, and then I see people who perhaps I don't talk to that much, but they've seen my post online, and they almost immediately, not they haven't meant to do it, but they talk to me as if I'm a bit work shy, and I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, no, like I work bloody hard. I put out a podcast a week. I run my own marketing business. I'm a commentator for one of the windsurfing tours. This is not just me listing my accolades or anything, but you
I've
know,
done mine. You got to do
you
yours
done,
now.
yeah. I got to put mine in now. But it's one of those things where like you and I'm fascinated for you to get your opinion on it and dig a bit more into it. But I do sometimes wonder, especially people who are perhaps a bit more business minded, financially or financially orientated, your CEOs, things like that. I do wonder if sometimes they go, all these people moaning about mental health and feeling anxious, in the back of their heads, they might not voice it, but I do wonder if they're sitting there going, these guys are just being lazy. They just want to sit at home and, it's the old, oh, they just want to sit at home under a
Yeah.
blanket and watch Netflix. They're not actually depressed or anything. And I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit more, because I find all that stuff fascinating. I do wonder, yeah, how people think about that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier around the pendulum could swing in the wrong direction, where well-being and mental health is used as a scapegoat
Yeah.
for underperformance. And obviously the ones that are, acutely watching the performance of the business is the senior leadership, is the board members, are the people watching the numbers going, we've got more people off this month on sick days, and look at the revenue. It's
Mm.
very easy for them to then make an assumption. And I think it's very difficult that a lot of the CEOs I speak to now, the generational shift is happening.
Yeah.
I think millennials are in near to 75% of all leadership roles now,
Wow.
across the UK businesses, and Gen Z aren't coming up far behind that. And I think we've got to be careful how lost we get on the Gen Z and millennials discussion, because I
It's
don't know, I'm
nonsense.
a millennial and I still have ways of thinking like I'm maybe a slightly bit older
Yeah.
and something slightly more immature every now and then. But ultimately, looking at it, is the working world has shifted, and the people I speak to really genuinely do care a lot more about their people.
Nice.
And I'm sure there's a part around laziness. I'm sure people will, in their right mind, they might see someone take a day off for feeling, a bit unwell, and deep down you'll go, I'll get a grip of yourself. But
Yeah.
I think everyone's got their opinion. It's just how it's labeled and voiced within the working world is, you've got to be very careful what you say, and also how you support one another. But I'll tell you what, if you've got a good culture, you will see less people going on sick anyway, because most days people go on sick because they can't be bothered. And if they
Yeah.
can't be bothered, there's something deeper rooted into that than, I need to go and see the team today. I love working with my team. I love what we do at work. And those companies see it less.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also within certain businesses and working cultures as well, you have something that I call the suffering Olympics. Of There's always people kind of showing off about how, I suppose another word for it is hustle culture. People showing off about how hard they worked. For me, it was
Mm,
my first introduction to it was as a waiter when I was 16 years old, and people would, oh, what time you on till? And then other people, oh, well, I only got 6 hours of sleep last night because I was in at 5 this morning. And then other people, well,
mm,
I will work later. And it's like people almost want recognition and a kind of round of applause for working too hard, and then you see them a few days later or something like that, and they're still going like that, but you can just see they're just worn down completely and they're in a bad mood. And as you said, I imagine they're not far off being like, fuck this, I'm going to call in sick today. and then and then
yeah.
and then they call in sick, they do that, and then it resets again, and then they work really hard, and the suffering Olympics begins again. Who's got it worst, you know
The suffering Olympics. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and
I
I
love that.
wonder. Yeah, well, yeah, it's just it's something that's always frustrated me. As I said, I still could picture it in my head. This lady, I won't name her, but yeah, when I was a waiter when I was 16, she did that, and that's stuck in my head ever since. Of like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be, you know.
Yeah.
But
It's
equally,
it's um
yeah, it's not a working hard thing. It's like I don't understand why you're, because it's clearly making them miserable. You know,
yeah, I've seen that a lot. I think
I can imagine.
my story's harder than your story type
Yeah,
of
exactly.
thing. And I've noticed it a lot in us wonderful Brits. I took a few trips to the States last year, and I realized just how much, although the States does things very differently and they have a very hire fast, fire fast culture, and yeah, they do things in different ways that might go against the grain of us British folk, but they do celebrate success, and
Yeah,
people are very much like up for seeing you be successful. Who can I introduce you to? Where can I help? What do you need? And although that exists in the UK, I think it's not as frequent as what it is in the States, and we might come back on the plane and go, God, they're a positive bunch, but we can be quite a negative bunch. And I think what we seek is, it's far more deep rooted than I think we all want to admit. That, I don't, not to go down the social media rabbit hole, but there's so much lack of acknowledgement, of other people. The average Joe who has 300 followers on Instagram posts and gets 4 likes, and then they see the people they follow get 1.5 million likes, or
yeah,
ridiculous things like that. and we validate ourselves against what's out there as opposed to, what's in here in our mind and in our heart. And worse still, like, we don't validate ourselves against the wonderful people we live with. I think I became very at peace with who I am, which can sometimes be someone who rubs people up the wrong way, and other times be great for people.
Mm.
Is when I had children, and when the kids came along, I was like, do you know what? I've suddenly realised I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. I'm just here to make my mark on the world and hopefully leave something great behind. And if I know I've left two great children behind, then I've done something pretty cool. And if I can leave a product like Loopin behind, then I've done something extra for those guys. And I think that's the trouble, is over here we just don't celebrate one another enough. We don't go, fucking you're awesome. And so what we end up doing is we end up trying to build like grisly stories around how tough your life is and what you've been through and your shifts, and you're working harder than everyone else. So people kind of acknowledge that and go, yeah, actually you're the one out of all of us. You're the fighter. You're amazing. You really dig in deep. And I think that's a very dangerous place for us to be. It just shows how lack at peace people are with themselves if they have to flaunt themselves in that way to gain respect or be acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. You said, yeah, perfectly. I think a lot of the time as well, I think you said it is a lot more deep rooted than we think. And a lot of the time we're very quick to just tear each other down if someone goes slightly against the grain. If I told someone at the time, oh, I'm going to start a podcast about mental health, I'm sure there would have been plenty of people that were like,
yeah, good luck with that.
Fuck yeah, fuck you doing that for? What's the point in that? Whereas I'm sure, and I've never been to the States, but I've heard it a lot, and I've met a lot of Americans throughout my life, and other places and things, and they're yeah, I think it's the whole American dream thing, isn't it? They're all about success and finding that dream, and whereas I think we find we're a bit more sarcastic about it, and we're like, fuck you doing that for? What are you doing?
I do. Yeah, just so I caveat, not offending the entire British population who listen to your podcast. I was the same, and I think we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
The one of the biggest values I took away from the Marines was cheerfulness in the face of adversity. And actually, I think Brits are quite good at doing that. We do have this bulldog spirit where you'll laugh and take the piss out of it, as opposed to
acknowledging how bad it is.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're covered in mud and hanging out, and it's all windy and wet and cold. Like, this sucks. And I learned that kind of gallows humor in the Marines, and that thing's really helped me. The other thing I took from the military was three: the cheerfulness in the face of adversity, one value. There's 8 values, but that's one of them. Excellence was the other, and excellence is a word that I live and breathe. Where everyone thinks we're perfect in the military. It's not perfection. You could think a value of perfection exists, but it doesn't. Perfection doesn't exist. You can't ever obtain it, but excellence does, and you can continuously strive for excellence. And then the last one was humility, and it never really sort of sunk in when I was in the Marines. And actually, we even had that same kind of culture in the Marines where it was a bit, my tour was harder than your tour, and we had more contacts with the enemy than you did. And I think that's just the natural culture, and you can see that in the wider in the country. But humility was one I took away and really thought about, because I was stepping into being a business owner. I had no experience of running a business or being in business. I could come across from the military and go, I've been in combat for 10 years and I know military leadership, and I've trained recruits, and I do this and I do that, and I know everything, and I'm elite, and this is how we do stuff. Or I could come across and go, okay, I've got all that experience, but now this next chapter I haven't got a fucking clue about. So I'm going to ask people, and I'm going to try and be the person in the room who has the least amount of knowledge, so I can obtain knowledge for those great people in the room. And then when I know everything in the room, I'm going to go to the next room, and so on, and keep the networks and the community. And that's really helped me. And I wonder where our humility is for some people, where we allow ego to get in the way, and that's where we tarnish one another, or we discredit or are negative to one another's good work, where, somewhere along the line, someone would have said to your podcast about mental health. I don't know. There's an ego there.
Yeah.
It's saying you can't go and start the podcast about mental health. but Sandy will. And you're humble with that to say, oh, well, we'll see how it goes. And you go and
Yeah.
do it. And now it's very successful. And I think that's something we have to all come to terms with is ego is something that can often very much trip us up, a bad negative part of our ego. And we have to be aware of that little voice on our shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've led me perfectly into the last thing I want to talk about, and that was specifically with men. And I think that's specifically a problem with men is that ego thing as well. Because, and again, so interested to hear what you have to say. Given that you're a ex Royal Marine, but there is that kind of alpha male thing of like there's and I think there's a very fine line between ego and confidence, and I think
Yeah.
confidence is a very good thing.
Yeah.
Confidence is brilliant, but at, at the same time, if you're being egotistical, generally it means you're probably not very confident because you're having to shout
Yeah.
about it. You're having to shout about it. Um, when I sort of quit my job and things, whilst I've like done some cool stuff, and generally I'm like, I feel like I'm a pretty cool guy. I don't necessarily like talk about it and things like that. And as soon as I like what you said, and I very much went down the same route of as soon as I quit my job and went into social media and all this, I'm like, I mean, I know about it. I can do it, but I don't really know anyone or anything like that. I didn't realize it until starting jiu-jitsu, but I was like I was the white belt mentality of like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be a sponge. I'm gonna be a
Yeah.
sponge and I'm gonna be entirely shameless in this endeavor. And I'm just gonna email everybody and all this and try and just learn and drop the ego. But I had other aspects of my life which I knew I was good at. So there was still that little bit of confidence and still, going back to like your ego book, every time I went windsurfing or something and like landed a couple of good tricks because I've been doing it for years and I know I'm quite good at it. I'd do that and that would just feed me a little bit and I'd be like, cool, I've got I still know I'm Sandy and I'm cool and I'm good at something, but then I've got this other thing that I'm trying to do that's more important that I know I'm learning. And I think it's wonderful having, and I think it's important people take stock in that, and that's where I think men especially having an interest or a sport or something that you enjoy doing that you can work on and get good at is they call it intrinsically motivating, not got anything to do with your job. So that even if you do change your job and you're learning something new or forging your way in a new career, starting a business, and you're going, I've got no fucking idea what I'm doing. You're like, well, I'm going to tennis tonight and I know I'm going to absolutely smash whoever I'm playing, you know? So you get that. And I think that's really healthy. And I think especially men suffer with that. Obviously, of course, women do as well. But in terms of like the ego side of things, I think men are perhaps a bit more prone to being a bit egotistical.
Well, you only have to walk into a gym.
Yeah.
I train at the local classic pure gym, and I love people watching. Yeah,
Yeah.
I must look like a nutter in the corner who's just like stood there with one dumbbell, just watching people. And it's almost like gyms are like the most animalistic I think we can become,
Yeah.
and ego's so present. You'll have your big lad walk in, and he'll walk over and he'll start to look in the mirror and stretch off. You're listening. I know you're listening. And then the next big guy will come in and he's slightly bigger, and you'll see this other big lad who you thought originally was quite big just shrink a little bit, and
Yeah.
like the eye contact. And I just find it fascinating how we all carry ourselves within this room we all work out in. I'm a goofball in the gym. I just wear crap t-shirts. I love wearing what I call pesty shorts, which are a thing in the Marines. Like, how high can you get them before you're exposing yourself
Oh, nice.
unwillingly? We wear those running shorts and just go around and do really sort of crap workouts. But I love watching what's going on in the dynamic because there is a lot of ego in there, and it's why is it present and why is it here, and why are you not just stood there in like really pesty shorts, just not caring about how you look and working out and working hard? But that's not me moaning about it. I just find it fascinating because that you see that everywhere, and I believe with males especially, and that's why I picked on the big guys. Um, Males especially, I'm kind of aware myself of this one as well. When we're not very good at asking for stuff.
Mm.
The place I really struggle to ask stuff for myself is the supermarket, and I don't
I
know
can't
why.
either.
You got wonderful old little lady there, Sharon, who's worked there for 20 years at Tesco's, and she's there to help you. Her shirt even says "here to help," and yet as this kind of like big tattooed bald Marine, I feel really uncomfortable going up to her and going, "Can you show me where the puff pastry is kept?" And I don't know why. It's just like this mental blocker that I can't seem to ask in that
Yeah.
environment. I know for some reason I have no idea why. It's a lack of confidence. That's all it is. It's I don't know why that lack of confidence exists. It's pretty silly, really. But for many, and before I go on to that next point, that lack of confidence, what that then fuels is ego. It's like, I'll go find the puff pastry.
Yeah.
I don't need to ask anyone where the puff pastry is. I'll find the puff pastry,
Find it
even if you're
myself.
walking around the warehouse. Yeah, I'll get this. And it's such a funny little introduction to your own ego.
Yeah.
But it's bigger for some people. And I think when it comes to male mental health, when I had that amazing experience of going on the Diary of CEO, Stephen said to me when I was leaving, he said, "Oh, what's your favorite car? Or what would you love to be driven around in?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe one day I'd love a Range Rover." And that's changed along the way. But at the time, I was like, "A Range Rover." And he's like, "Okay, I get you a Range Rover." And he hired this Uber Range Rover outside, and I got in it. And he's like, "Enjoy the experience." And I got in, and like there's like little glitzy stars on the ceiling, and everything's neon lit, and there's champagne in the side.
Fucking hell.
And I just cried. I actually just sat there and cried, and I rang my wife, and she was like, "Oh, how was it?" I was like, "Yeah." I couldn't really talk to her, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I think I've worked it out." And I basically spent my teens and my 20s really struggling with who I was as a male, and part of it was because of my dad had run away early doors, and I didn't really have a male alpha figure in my life, and so I craved that, and I went on the doors, and then I joined the Marines, and I found that alpha male fix for someone to lead me in a way that a father would. And when I sat with Stephen and talked about it quite openly, and afterwards reflecting quite emotionally over it, it was just this huge weight off my shoulders where I thought, all this time I thought I was a fucking asshole. I thought I got into these fights or wanted to be in the Marines to be hard, to be tough.
Yeah.
And all it was I wanted uh, a, a person in my life who would just direct me and show me the way, and I never had it properly. And when I admitted that, I was just suddenly so at peace with myself, my experiences, and where I was going to head next in life. Up to that point, I thought I can never let this business fail, because if people see me fail, I failed, and that's shit. And at that point of driving away from being on, no offense, Sandy, but the biggest podcast in the UK,
No, it is. Yeah,
and
yeah.
hitting a goal like that, I was like, I'm so fucking cool with whatever happens next.
Yeah.
Because all that matters is that I'm at peace with myself and I love my family. And everything else kind of, no matter how hard it gets, suddenly feels easier to deal with. And there's so many guys and girls, but guys I know out there which could live such a much more fulfilled and purpose-led life if they just dropped it a little bit and enabled them to be them true selves. What a powerful way to live your life.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, first of all, congratulations for finding that. I think it's a very rare thing. Is finding that. I suppose the best thing is to call it is like inner peace. You found enlightenment almost. Of like, actually, this is what I care about. This is what, more importantly, this is what I don't care about.
Yeah.
And this is how I want to do it. And I think I'd be a liar if I said I found that. I'm 30, 31, and I'm still, I feel like it goes back to everything we've said. I feel like I'm still only just getting started, whether it is aspiring to be like, have a podcast like Stephen Bartlett's one day. I take no offense with stuff like that. And that's interesting that you said that. No offense. And I would have done the same thing if I was you, and a lot of the time they say you can either be like upset about it or you can be inspired. And I watch Stephen Bartlett or something like that, and I don't want to be like him, but I'd aspire to like have a certain amount of his level of success in this endeavor that I'm doing in the podcast. I don't want to be on Dragon's Den. I don't want to be, anything like that. But it's, I can either sit and choose to be. I suppose that's a certain level of inner peace I've got. Is I very quickly latched onto the comparison as a thief of joy thing. I can sit there and look at my mates who are doing this or doing that, and I can easily sit there and go, "Oh, I'm really jealous. I wish I could do that." Or I could just be like, well, they're, and equally what I realized is they're probably also looking at me and a certain aspect in my life, and they're going, "Oh, I wish I had that." And I'll never know because they'll never say it. Much like I would never say it to them, you know?
But you're strive. This is it as well, and I don't know why I said no offense because it's a meaningless comment.
No, it's
Um,
interesting though. It's not. I'm not.
yeah,
It's not angry about it or anything. It's just. Yeah. It's.
it's
If I was you, I would have said it as well. You know, because it's. Yeah.
it's interesting though because you mentioned around the black belt level.
Yeah.
Now you've got to earn it, and actually, you know, with talking of podcasts, Stevens is obviously doing very well, and now he's got to earn it to stay where it is.
Yeah.
Whereas people like you and I were still out striving, and I think that's such a fun thing to do. Is learn how to strive in life instead of trying to grab at what you think you want. And I think that's just I want you to be encouraged to be like, yeah, well, one day maybe I will be the
Yeah.
biggest podcast, and everyone should have that goal to be the best because it brings out this striving. But it goes back to this purpose. We can work and you can have your own businesses, but there's that one thing that is your purpose in life that you're striving towards, making it more successful, making it better at what it does, whatever it is. And I think I worry about a lot of people I know where I look at them and they say, "Oh, you're smashing it, you're out there, you're killing it," and I'm saying like, no, it's like chewing glass most of the time. And it's not enjoyable. It's hard work. It's difficult, and there's lots and lots of challenges. And then throw kids and a mortgage in, and it gets harder.
Mm.
But that's not to say I don't enjoy it, And so when people look at it and go, "Oh, you're smashing it, you're killing it," and all that stuff, I do want to say to them, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of a throwaway, meaningless comment. I'm not smashing anything. What I'm doing is I'm enjoying striving in a world I've not really experienced before. And striving means I'm accepting the challenges, I'm dealing with what comes, and I'm enjoying the process of it all. The moment I stop striving and stop feeling that, then we've got problems, and then I need to find something else to strive at. And when people say to you, Sandy, your podcast is killing it, which I heard yesterday from Dan. It's like, oh, it's one of the best podcasts. It's on the rise. Like striving, but why do other people say you're killing it? What are they not killing? What are they not enjoying? Why
Mm.
do they compare your journey and your success right now to killing it? And where's that individual? And I'm not pointing out Dan because I know he's killing it, but where are those people which say you're doing so well, doing it themselves? And those comments are so common with people who are successful or doing something. You hear it all the time. You're killing it. You're doing so well. Don't worry about me. What are you doing? Go and strive at something yourself so I can
Mm.
return the comment. Because I
Yeah.
think that's a big worry when you hear that so often.
Yeah. Yeah. You think people, it's very easy to like focus on other people's success all the time to the point where
Yeah.
you never necessarily think about yourself, whether it's people that are obsessed with like you see it all the time, people that are obsessed with celebrities and things like that. And of course some people go on to start a magazine or a blog or something about what celebrities are up to, and they'll do well. That's cool. If that's your passion, fine, do it. But I think some people do fully latch on to getting a bit obsessed with what other people are up to, that they let 10 years go by and they sit and look at themselves and they go, oh fuck, you know.
Yeah, my final point on that is there's a great book. I referenced it in my own book because I just found it completely life changing when I read it. Is
Yeah.
Bronnie Ware's Regrets of the Dying, and it's quite a morbid book. The title is not exactly appealing, but what it is, so she was a nurse in Australia and she worked in palliative care. So she would actually go to people's houses and just be with them through their last weeks, months, years, days of until they passed. And she started journaling what she was hearing most commonly, and she recorded these top five, most common comments amongst people, which was sort of saying their final words. And one of them was, "I wish I let myself be happier."
Mm.
And we were talking earlier about hitting rock bottom. I don't think there's a bigger rock bottom than being on your deathbed about to pass away. That's you now, game over.
That's
To
it. Yeah.
then have regrets and wish for those life changing moments. And I think there's so much we can learn from that, where let yourself be happier. What does that mean? You know, that is a mission in life for us all to explore, because
Yeah.
happy is different to your happy, to my happy, to someone else's happy. But just to be at peace with that. And I think the quicker people can get there, where they care less about the opinions of others and are content with themselves and know where they're heading and why they're heading there, you won't lie on that deathbed and go, oh, you'll lie there and go, I'm pretty chuffed with what I gave a go, and I've left that mark on the world. See you later. And then I think you'll go at peace then.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Maybe there'll
mean,
be less ghosts as well.
yeah, I mean that's a pretty wonderful sentiment to round it off. I mean, yeah, I feel exactly the same. You know, I've seen so many of the there's always things on Facebook of the old people. They got old people. They put whiteboards in old people's homes, and they wrote down like write three things to your 25-year-old self or something like that. And
Oh, lovely.
not a single one of them says make more money or do this.
Mm,
Every single one of them is, as you said, it's don't stress about the little things. You know, don't get pissed off if the line at McDonald's drive-through is too long. Don't get,
yeah.
you know, don't do you know what I mean? Just little things like that. Yeah, it's a great sentiment. Ben, where if people want to get in touch with you, follow you. I know you've got a book, you've obviously done other podcast things. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch or see more of what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Ben Williams. Type in Ben Williams and Loopin. You'll find me there. You can send me an email, ben@letsloopin.com. More than happy to receive emails. And yeah, my book Commando Mindset is available anywhere to buy. So yeah, you can read more about my story and my thinking within that book. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with lots of your listeners.
Brilliant. Yeah, guys, you can also follow me if you're new to this. I hope you're already following if you're not. You can also follow me on Instagram at the After Hours Lounge. If you like what I'm up to, please give it a like, give it a share. It's free to do, takes 20 seconds. Or you can give me your hard earned cash at the link in my bio if you really like what I'm doing. It helps me put more time into putting these episodes out and creating all the content that you see. So I will thank you in advance for doing one of those things. Ben, thank you again so much for coming on. And thank you guys for listening, and we will see you for the next one.